Hi, thank you for tuning into the Short Stacks. I'm Lisa Quintero, young adult librarian.
And I'm Nick Barron, patron and sometimes volunteer.
This is a show where we talk to you about what we've been listening to, reading, or watching, and about what's been going on at the library. So first,
Library news.
So we are still doing kits for kids and teens. So if you are interested in one of the kits, take a look at our calendar. We just finished doing a battery kit, a make-it-home battery kit for kids, and we've been doing the art cart kits on Wednesdays. The make-home battery kit was from Tinker Lab, and then we also have been doing the teen kits on Thursdays. So this week was an anime craft, and last week the tote bag? Yeah,
the tote bag.
No, last week was the plushie. The tote bag was the week before. But yeah, we had like a plush toy that you could make out of felt. So we've got a couple more of those coming up before the end of the summer. And the summer reading program ends on August 15th, so be sure to finish your books and get everything submitted before then in order to get your prizes and get entered into the raffle.
From the stacks.
So, Nick and I have decided to go camping. I have never been camping in my life. As somebody who was raised by a man from Mexico who grew up in a very impoverished household, my dad never thought that camping was like a thing that any normal sane person would do, because he grew up in a house with like dirt floors where 3 people slept to a bed. So to him, he's like, why would you want to put yourself through sleeping on a floor out in the dirt with the bugs when you could have a roof over your head and you could have like a bed all to yourself, or maybe just you and one other person, and be way more comfortable. And so growing up, we never went camping, like, ever. We didn't really do a lot of outdoors stuff other than going to the lake, and we'd go swimming at the lake.
Yep.
But yeah, so it's something that I've been curious about for years, and Nick has told me about some of his camping adventures, and I know, friends have gone camping, and I really enjoy hiking, and I enjoy the great outdoors, so I'm looking forward to it. So this week we're going to be talking a bit about some books that we read about camping, and about Nick's camping experiences, and what he thinks is going to happen with me on our upcoming camping trip.
So I want to note that 10 years ago, if you asked Lisa about going camping, she would have said that, no, I have no interest in going camping. And so this is a very new thing. But
not that new. I'd say probably it's since we've moved to Wisconsin. I think I've met a lot more people here in Wisconsin that do the outdoor thing than back home in Chicago. So
no, very much so. But even 5 years ago when we got here, people talked about camping, and Lisa reacted with, I don't know about that, and has slowly come around. Now
it's because of spiders. I don't like spiders.
This is true. Charlotte's Web, should have impacted you much stronger.
I mean, it did impact me. It's just that I don't like them crawling on me. They have too many legs. I like Charlotte's Web. I understand that Charlotte was pretty cool, but I just don't want them anywhere near me.
So, anyways, but my experiences camping are very varied, because we're going to get into this when we talk about some of the books. But my first experience camping was actually not like normal camping. We went to a campsite, but my dad had a white beat-up work van, and he had pulled all of his tools out of the work van and thrown a couple of mattresses in, and my parents bought a bunch of those little tiny Kellogg's cereal boxes.
Oh, I forgot about those.
And that was camping. In fact, I even vividly remember, even though I was really young, I vividly remember that it was freezing, and my dad leaving the engine running the entire night because all of us were cold.
That's no good. You guys could have died.
But
I guess you were outside. You were in the garage. But
it was not in a garage, and I'm sure the windows were probably cracked.
Yeah.
But it was also the 70s, so you never know.
Yeah, that's true.
But
people did. We didn't wear seatbelts. I wasn't alive in the 70s.
Yeah.
I know in the 80s we did not wear seatbelts, and my dad let us ride in the front seat all the time.
Yeah. So yeah. But my first experiences camping were like that, and it wasn't until in my high school years that my one really good friend David Barnes, he he was really big into the Scouts. And I reference that because you're going to be talking about some Boy Scouts of America stuff. But he was really into the Scouts, and he approached camping from an area of respect, and caring about the
conservation and preservation kind of mindset.
Yeah, it's not like when I camped with my folks that they threw trash everywhere. It wasn't like that at all. But it also I wasn't taught about packing in and packing out and things like that. It was more of, hey, we show up at a campsite, we did the thing, and then we went home. So
I actually, because this is my first time, I decided to go with some books that are geared towards kids because I figured, simple is best. Yeah. And so I remember from being a children's librarian several years ago that my old library that I worked at had the Boy Scouts of America Merit Badge series. And so I looked in our county cat and found that while Shorewood doesn't have the Merit Badge series, other libraries do. And so I actually got these sent over from West Allis Public Library. And the one that I originally ordered was just the camping one. But then after talking to my coworker Nathan, who was a Boy Scout, he said, you probably also want to get the wilderness survival one just so you know how to deal with like poison ivy and spider bites and things like that, first aid. So I was like, all right, that seems smart. So I got both of these. They're very easy to read because they're geared towards, kids. And they break things down very succinctly. So I really like the camping one. It kind of gives you intro into what is required. It gives you a checklist of things that you should bring with you on your trip. It talks all about, conservation and preservation of the land and how, you should leave things better than you found them. It also talks about, being prepared and where to camp. It talks about the difference between front country camping and back country camping, which I didn't know that there was multiple types of camping, so I learned something new. I learned lots of new things, actually. It talked about different types of foods that you want to bring on camping trips, and if you're doing backcountry versus front country. If you're doing front country, they're like you can bring fruit and vegetables and things like that are fresh. But if you're doing backcountry, they're like you want to bring a bunch of dehydrated stuff because you have to carry it all in your pack. And I'm sure a lot of people know all this already, but to me this is all new information. So I was just like, whoa, what? It also talked about cooking safety, and it gave some recipes. It also talked about water and cleaning your water if you're not in a front country campsite, because it said, in a front country campsite, the water is usually drinkable, but if you're camping backcountry, you want to bring some sort of, tablets or things like that. You've yet to purify your water. One thing that I really liked about this one is it has a outdoor essentials guide that tells you, what you should bring with. So it's got a pocket knife and a first aid kit and extra clothing and rain gear and a water bottle and a flashlight and trail food and matches and sun protection and a whole bunch of other stuff. And it also lists the types of clothes that you should bring. And it also talks about, the difference between backpacks if you're doing backpacking, and it talks about the difference between sleeping bags and tents, which, I didn't know that there were so many different kinds of tents.
Yep.
And it also talked about the different kinds of camping stoves and what kind of camping stove you want to use depending on what kind of trip you're going on. And what kind of utensils you should bring. And it talked about, one thing that I didn't know is that, if you're in bear country, which everybody in Wisconsin probably knows this, but I did not know this because I didn't grow up camping, is that, you're supposed to tie your food up into a tree and keep it out of animals' reach. But then it said, if you're doing front country camping, you can just store your food in your car. I also learned about sanitation and cat holes. And digging latrines and washing your dishes out in nature, which I never really thought about, because it talked about how you should, in order to keep food scraps, because food scraps, it said can make local wildlife sick. So it said that once you wash your dishes, you should strain the dishwater and then take all the little scraps and put them in with your trash so that you're not leaving.
Ooh, that's something I didn't know.
Out in the wild. So, and then you can dump your water out, but you gotta strain your water before you dump it out so that you're not throwing a bunch of different food debris out into the woods.
Yeah, that is something that I never knew.
Yeah, so I was like, oh, that's interesting. So that was the camping one, and then the wilderness survival one kind of covers a bunch of different scenarios and covers what to do. And so it talked a lot about the stop
Drop and roll?
No, not a stop, drop, and roll. So I talked about like responding to a adverse situation in an outdoor emergency, and so it talked about how in an outdoor situation, like the most important thing is to have a positive attitude, and that will get you through, and that if you have a negative attitude, you're less likely to make it all the way through and like survive. And so it talked about how to prioritize things like signaling and having water and fire and first aid and shelter and food. It also talked about, okay, here's the stop thing. So you're supposed to, if you're lost, you're supposed to stop. So stop, think, observe, and plan. So one of the things that it said is that if you think you're lost, you should stop, because if you have a map with you or some sort of device that can help you reorient yourself, like a compass or a GPS or whatever, that you can use that to try and find your way back to the trail. But then it said, if you feel like you're too lost and you don't recognize any of the landmarks nearby, that you can always just stay there, because at least if you're with a scout troop or you're with some, if you plan in advance, because one thing that they talk about is letting people know back home where you're going, how long you're being gone for, what exactly you're intending to do on your trip, so that whether you're with a scout troop or whether you're going out on your own, somebody always knows where you're supposed to be. And if you don't happen to show up by a certain time at a certain place, then they send in rescue. And so I talked about how if you're lost and you can't find your way back, it's better to just stay where you are, and eventually it'll be easier to find you than if you're just wandering through the woods or the mountains or wherever, because the more you wander, the more lost you're going to get. And, it talked about observing your surroundings and making a plan. And, using things like mirrors as signals and bright scraps of clothing, or like handkerchiefs as signals as well, that you could use to get the attention of, like aircraft or of other people that are far away. So yeah, it was really interesting. It also talked a lot about different things like basic first aid, so CPR and how to stop severe bleeding and how to deal with shock, and how to turn a garbage bag into like a poncho, but also use it for like a variety of other things. It talked about a bunch of different like essential things that you should have with you. It also talked about something that made me think of the show MacGyver, because it talked about like, okay, well, if you had like this, and this is the situation that you are found in, what could you do with these 3 items in order to like, and so it talked about, being creative with the things that you have, and trying to be prepared in terms of the things that you carry on you. And it also talked about what you should carry on your person versus in your pack, because if you're separated from your pack, you might be in trouble. So it talked about, like carrying like matches on your person, and maybe carrying some like water purification tablets on your person, and if you have medication that you have to take, and things like that. Talked about hypothermia and frostbite, and talked about, things that we don't have to worry quite as much about here in Wisconsin, like snake bites, but also, spider bites. I'm just like, I hope I don't see any black widows. I'm sure I probably will. Stinging insects, ticks, when I know we'll see ticks, that's fine. We'll protect ourselves. But yeah, and then also talked about, identifying, it has pictures for poison ivy and poison oak and poison sumac. And talks about shelter, and it talks, so a lot of different, things that you could use for wilderness survival. It also talks about several ways to build a fire without using matches.
So even though a lot of people in Wisconsin are much more experienced campers, I'm sure that there's some information in that particular book that people would take something away from.
Yeah, for sure. And then I was looking at the back, and there's all sorts of, other of the merit badge books are mentioned within these books, and they have like, different ones that would tie into stuff like orienteering, which, would help if you're going on a long hiking trip or something. And pioneering, I guess, is another one that they said they recommend for this sort of thing. They also, if you're going whitewater rafting or things like that, they have one on whitewater rafting. So yeah, they have several interesting merit badge ones, and they're pretty short. They're less than 100 pages. So if you're just looking for an introductory thing so that you can learn the basics of camping, if you're like me and your family was like, no, we don't do this. You can learn, and you can, go on your very own adventure if you so choose. The other book that I picked up from the library actually, again, was not something that we owned at Shorewood, but it's something from the Oak Creek Library. I got a cookbook called The Dirty Gourmet, which is food for your outdoor adventures, and it contains all sorts of different recipes for stuff that you could cook at camp. And it has the cooking method listed, so some of it's stuff that you would make at home and bring with you, some of it's stuff that you would need a 2-burner stove for, some of the stuff you could make over a campfire, and some is stuff that you would make with a light backpacking stove. And there's quite a few recipes in here that seemed very tasty.
Side note, one of the things that there was actually a couple of recipes in the camping
the Boy Scouts book?
Boy Scout book. And I had, even though I've been camping, I had never thought of the idea of preparing my pancake mix in advance and having the dry ingredients all mixed together in one canister and the wet ingredients in another canister, and then just mixing it on the campsite and making pancakes. And that is something we are definitely going to do.
Yep. Yeah, I'm excited to try that out. But yeah, there's a lot of recipes in here that look delicious. There's like grilled green bean salad that you can make over the fire. There's, vegetable skewers. There were some flautas that looked really good. It breaks it down into, I never thought about it, but you can make desserts, like cakes and stuff. I mean, we're not going to take a fancy, oven with us, but it's like, oh, I do plan on making s'mores. But yeah, I'm very excited to try this out. I've always been interested in camping to some degree, but it wasn't until probably about, I think it was 6 or 7 years ago, I read Wild by Cheryl Strayed, which is about her hiking the Pacific Crest Trail on her own. And I thought, that's really cool. And then also, a few years before that, I read Into the Wild by John Krakauer, and I kind of admired Christopher McCandless, but at the same time, thought he was a little dumb because he went out there with no preparation whatsoever and ended up dying because he ate these, plants that he shouldn't have been eating, and they made him sick, and ultimately he poisoned himself. But these stories are things that have always interested me, but I haven't pursued it out of, 1, fear of spiders, and 2, just not knowing anything about it really, and also knowing that in some areas, I mean, growing up in Illinois, it's you wouldn't have to worry about bears, but I know that you go further up in northern Wisconsin or Minnesota, and there are bears.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because when we lived in Chicago, we had friends and even a roommate that were really, really into the idea of going out into the woods and roughing it, full on into the wild style. I remember you thought they were all kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But you enjoyed hiking.
I do. I've always enjoyed hiking.
But
yeah, I think the more that I've read and the more that I've thought about it and talked to people about it, the more I'm like, this seems like something I want to try. I don't know that I'm gonna love it. I might hate it, but I'm willing to try it. I got my sleeping bag. We bought a tent. I'm very excited. We actually set up our tent today to see if we could, do it before we go on our first camping trip, because we're going in mid-August. So
and it was nice. We had a little bit of a challenge with it because it was very breezy today, and so our tent pieces were blowing all over the place. So that was nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's Lisa likes an adventure.
I do like adventure,
and that's what this is going to be.
And I like learning new things about things that I haven't done before. So,
But yeah, one of the bit of assigned reading that Lisa gave me that I did not complete was The Green Guide to Low Impact Hiking and Camping by Laura and Guy Waterman. This is a book about low impact hiking and camping, as the name implies. I didn't get very far into it, in all honesty, because this book actually came out in 1979, but they've reissued and rewritten it multiple times to change with the times. There was multiple forwards and introductions, but it was one of the things that stuck out in one of the introductions was that I recently started rock climbing, but doing indoor rock climbing. And one of the things that they talked about was how outdoor recreation of this nature has gotten more and more popular. And one of the things that rock climbing has become increasingly popular, and people have wanted to, go out and actually they learn some skills indoors, and then they want to go take it outside. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that's resulted in is that people go to different cliff and rock faces, and they would go and they wouldn't think about the conservation of the land, mm-hmm. and they would just like trample over all the brush, and they would in some cases like insert bolts into the rock face in order to have the was it pitons for their mm-hmm. For the carabiners or what have you.
Yeah, which is very different from like the Boy Scouts and the conservation aspect of it, because it's like reading the camping guide for the Boy Scouts, it's like you're supposed to find established campsites or areas where there's dead vegetation instead of placing your mm-hmm. stuff over fresh vegetation, and you're supposed to avoid hiking through areas where there's fresh vegetation. You're supposed to try to stick to trails and establish trails, and
take only pictures, leave only footprints. But because people got excited and they were like, hey, I like this rock climbing, I want to take it outside, and so there wasn't, as they put it, the etiquette. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting how all different activities have their own etiquette. As somebody who is a longtime bowler, uh-huh. When I go bowling and I'm waiting at the line and I'm about to throw my ball, if somebody in the neighboring lane just jumps up and throws their ball, I'm thinking to myself, don't they know any etiquette? But that's because I grew up bowling, mm-hmm. and have these ideas in my head of this is how bowling is supposed to go. But somebody who's never bowled in a league or what have you mm-hmm. might not know that they're not supposed to do this. Yeah. And
I didn't know there was bowling etiquette. Yeah. I just go up and do the thing.
Yeah, no, you're supposed to wait until the person next to you is done. Oh. And so
I guess I do that now, but maybe I think it's just from observing other people, but I didn't know that was like a thing.
Yeah, no, it's a thing. And skateboarding's the same way. When you're at a ramp, you don't just drop in on a ramp when somebody else is going. You wait your turn. Mm-hmm. There's an established etiquette for many different things, and one of the things that hikers and backpackers had established etiquette of how to conserve the land and enjoy it at the same time. Mm-hmm. And then other people came in and they were like, oh, we're going to do this thing, and it ran counter to what was going on. And so they talked quite a bit in the one of the introductions, because as I said, there were multiple, mm-hmm. About that change in the culture, mm-hmm. Which is really interesting.
Yeah, I'm curious to read that one before we go on our trip. If anybody has any suggestions for what to do, we're planning on doing some hiking. We actually booked ourselves a campsite up in Kettle Moraine on the northern unit, so I'm very excited, and planning on maybe doing some swimming up at the lakes up there. But other than that,
yeah, first timer.
We'll see how it goes. I'm a camping noob.
Yeah, and in all honesty, it's been, I think, 1996.
Okay, so it's been a while for you.
Yeah, I think the last time I went camping was in 1996. I've spent plenty of time sleeping in vans and cars because I was in a touring band, but that's not the same as sleeping in a sweltering hot tent. So yeah, it's gonna be a new experience, especially for Lisa and I.
Yeah, I'm hoping for good weather so we can sleep with it without the rain fly on it. Look at the stars. Yes. Hopefully not too many creepy crawlies. But we'll see.
Yeah,
it's nature. I expect creepy crawlies. Just no black widows, please.
Yes.
And that book that I was mentioning, The Dirty Gourmet, I forgot to mention who the authors were on that one. If you're curious, the authors are Amy Trudeau, Emily Nielsen, and Maiyan Kwan. And the subtitle is Food for Your Outdoor Adventures. As always, thank you for tuning into the Shorewood Stacks. We hope you have enjoyed the show. If you have any questions or comments for our host, you can send them to us at shorewoodstacks@gmail.com. You can find us on Podbean, Spotify, and iTunes. Until next time, thanks for listening, and be well. Sherwood Stacks is produced by Lisa Quintero and Nick Barron, with music by Kevin MacLeod. The title of this song is Ice Flow and can be found on incompetech.com.